I heard moaning in our building's parking garage. When I turned the corner, I found my fiancée pressed against a car with a guy. She said she was stuck in traffic. When they saw me, my name is Ronan, and the night everything snapped started in the most ordinary way possible. I came home early from a long shift, hungry and ready to collapse. Mira had texted earlier that she was stuck in traffic on her way back from meeting a friend. She said she would be late and asked me to heat up the leftover pasta. Nothing about her message felt unusual. If anything, it felt boring in the regular day-to-day way. I tossed my coat on the couch, dropped onto the armchair, and tried to unwind. That plan lasted about 5 minutes before the building's group chat chimed with a notice that someone left their headlights on in the parking garage. The message included a blurry photo, and I recognized the car behind it. It was Myra's sedan. That made me get up again. She had claimed she was stuck somewhere on the east side, and I had no reason to doubt her until that blurry photo told me she was in the building. I assumed she returned home earlier than expected and forgot to text. It would have been annoying, not catastrophic. I headed down to the elevator with the casual frustration of someone about to deal with another person's forgetfulness. When the elevator doors slid open on the first sublevel, I felt the familiar cold of the underground air that always seemed to trap the smell of dust and motor oil. I walked toward Myra's parking space, expecting to find her car sitting empty with the lights on. Instead, I heard faint sounds echoing between the rows of vehicles. At first I thought someone was working on an engine, because it had that rhythm to it. Then the sound shifted, softer and uneven in a way that made the hair on the back of my neck rise. It wasn't the mechanical hum of tools. It was something completely different, unmistakable even when muffled by concrete pillars. I froze mid-step, listened again, and felt a sharp jolt of dread. Those sounds didn't belong in a parking garage. They belonged somewhere private, somewhere intimate, somewhere far from me. I followed the echoes slowly, moving between parked cars, and each step tightened something in my chest. My mind tried to rationalize everything. Maybe a couple slipped in here from the street. It wasn't unheard of. Maybe two strangers were using the garage like a hiding spot. Anything was better than imagining Mira involved. The sounds grew clearer as I turned the next corner. I stopped behind a pillar and looked toward a dark blue car parked halfway between two concrete columns. Mira was pressed against that car. A man had his hands on her, holding her in a way that left no room for friendship or confusion. Her head was tilted back against the metal, and I realized the noise echoing across the garage had come from her. The shock didn't hit like a movie moment. It felt like stepping into cold water while half asleep, numbing first, then suffocating. The man turned his head first when he heard my footsteps. I recognized him from the building. Quinn. He worked upstairs in one of the corporate firms. I'd seen him in the lobby more times than I could count. He jumped back fast, nearly tripping over his own shoes. Mira turned next, and the expression on her face shifted through too many emotions to track. Fear, panic, anger, guilt, confusion, all stacked together like she couldn't decide which one would save her. I didn't shout. The moment was too surreal for noise. I asked what I was looking at. She straightened her clothes and acted as if the entire situation were a minor misunderstanding. She said she wasn't doing what it looked like. She said she had only stopped in the garage because her car felt strange and she bumped into Quinn by coincidence. She said she never meant for anything to happen. She said the phrase "stuck in traffic" like it explained the entire scene. None of her words aligned with reality. There was no reason for Quinn to be anywhere near her. He didn't live on our floor. He didn't work late. He wasn't anywhere near her life. Yet somehow, there he was with her in the darkest part of the garage. Quinn tried to speak too quickly and stumbled through a rambling explanation about helping her with her engine, except they were nowhere near the hood. His shirt was crooked. His belt was undone. He stepped backward repeatedly as though distance could change what I had already seen. A loud beep echoed suddenly. Quinn had bumped against his own car and triggered the alarm. The headlights flashed, and the horn blared, filling the concrete space with a sharp metallic echo. The noise drew attention immediately. Doors opened on multiple levels of the garage as people stuck their heads out of their cars to see what caused the commotion. The building's night security guard, an older guy named Owen who lived on site, hurried down the ramp with a flashlight. Owen asked what was going on. Quinn kept trying to talk over Mira, and the two of them turned into a chaotic mess of explanations. I stood there listening to excuses that didn't make sense. At some point, Mira tugged at my arm and asked me to go upstairs so we could talk alone. She said there were things she needed to explain. She said I was misinterpreting everything. Owen looked between us like he didn't believe a word either of them said. He asked if anyone needed the police. I said no. I wanted silence, not escalation. I walked past the three of them and took the elevator up to our floor without turning around. Mira followed me into the lobby, but I kept walking until I reached our apartment. I closed the door before she caught up. She knocked for a while, but eventually stopped. I sat in the living room in the dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't even take off my shoes. I just sat there listening to the distant hum of the building's ventilation. Every thought circled the same image of Mira against the car. I kept replaying the sound that had pulled me toward the worst truth of my life. My phone buzzed around midnight. I ignored it at first, then looked when it rang again. It was Owen from downstairs. He said something that snapped me awake. After everything quieted down, Quinn returned to the garage alone. He wasn't looking for his keys or gathering belongings. According to Owen, he walked straight toward the security panel that stores camera footage. He tried to access it. Then he tried again. Owen confronted him, and Quinn claimed he needed to check something about his own parking space. He left quickly when he realized Owen wasn't buying it. That was the moment the evening shifted from betrayal into something else entirely. Mira and Quinn weren't panicking because they got caught. They were panicking because something existed that they needed to hide. Something they weren't supposed to erase. I thanked Owen for telling me and hung up. The apartment felt different after that call. The betrayal was no longer a spontaneous mistake. It was something planned or repeated. Something coordinated. Something they never expected to surface. The night stretched on, and Mira didn't come home. The building's silence felt heavier than it ever had before, and I sat there waiting for the next piece of truth to fall. Mira returned home early in the morning. I had spent the night mostly awake, drifting in and out of shallow sleep on the couch. When her key clicked in the door, I stayed still and listened to her footsteps enter the apartment slowly, like she expected to find the place in pieces. She walked to the living room and stood behind the couch without speaking. I didn't turn around. Eventually, she moved to the opposite side and tried to sit in front of me, but I shifted away. She asked for a chance to explain, yet she never offered anything that resembled clarity. Her words circled vague ideas about stress, confusion, and misunderstandings. None of it answered the garage, Quinn, or why she was on camera trying to erase evidence. When she realized I wouldn't accept anything meaningless, she left the apartment again. I didn't follow. I wasn't ready for another confrontation until I understood what she and Quinn were hiding. The silence she left behind felt almost intentional, like she had hoped distance would soften the impact long enough for her to regain control of the narrative. Instead, I grabbed my jacket and headed downstairs to the lobby. The building manager, a middle-aged man named Owen's supervisor, was behind the front desk reviewing overnight logs. I approached him and asked if any requests had been made about the camera system. He hesitated before answering, which told me enough before he opened his mouth. He admitted someone had asked to access the footage, but he refused to say who until he checked the authorization list. When he pulled up the record, he looked at me with a puzzled expression. The request hadn't come from Mira or Quinn. It hadn't come from anyone who lived in our building. The request came from Myra's mother. She didn't live there. She didn't even live in the same part of the city. There was no reason she should have known about the garage incident unless Mira had contacted her immediately. None of that felt natural. The manager explained that she claimed to have emergency reasons and told the staff she needed to view the feed as quickly as possible. She didn't get access because she lacked the required permissions, but she tried. That attempt opened an entirely new level of confusion for me. What could Mira have told her mother that would drive her across the city before sunrise? I went back upstairs faster than I had planned. Mira hadn't returned yet, so I paced the living room for almost an hour before she finally walked back into the apartment. She froze when she saw the look on my face and asked what happened. I asked her why her mother was trying to pull camera footage from our building. The reaction she gave me didn't show surprise. It showed dread. She didn't deny it. She didn't even question how I found out. She covered her face with her hands and sat on the edge of the kitchen counter, shaking her leg nervously. She said her mother always tried to control situations involving her relationships. She said her mother convinced her that staying silent would prevent everything from escalating further. She said her mother believed any recorded evidence would destroy her career opportunities, and that she had begged Mira to let her handle everything. Mira didn't clarify why Quinn was involved at all. Her explanation danced around the truth without touching it. Before I could push further, a knock echoed through the apartment. I answered it, expecting security, but instead I found a woman I barely recognized. She introduced herself as Rosa, Quinn's wife. Her eyes were red, and her hands were shaking. She said Quinn came home at dawn in a frantic state and told her I had threatened him in the garage, which never happened. He claimed I had cornered him, cursed at him, and threatened to hit him with a tool from one of the maintenance carts. Rosa said his story didn't match his clothing, which was wrinkled and disheveled in ways that didn't fit with his version. She asked me to tell her exactly what happened. Behind her, Mira appeared in the hallway looking like she had been caught in another lie she hadn't prepared for. Rosa glanced at her and made a sound that wasn't quite a gasp, but close enough. She understood immediately that Mira had been the woman Quinn wasn't naming. Rosa asked if she could see the garage herself. I agreed because I needed clarity just as badly. We walked downstairs together. Mira followed us despite my attempts to keep distance. Her presence only added tension. When we reached the garage, Rosa walked around the area like she wanted to absorb every detail. She touched the side of Quinn's car, stared at the concrete pillar nearby, and shook her head like she had finally confirmed months of suspicions. Owen, the security guard, appeared again when he saw us. He told us he had locked the footage for review and requested the building manager to handle everything, because Quinn's behavior raised too many red flags. Rosa asked him if there were other angles. Owen said there were additional cameras positioned near the ramp and the rear exit. While he spoke, Mira kept shifting her weight nervously like she was deciding whether to run or faint. Her anxiety wasn't subtle. It was loud in the way her hands fidgeted, in the way she avoided Rosa's eyes, and in the way she kept glancing toward the locked security office door. Owen explained something unexpected. The additional camera had captured footage from earlier in the week. That footage showed Mira and Quinn entering the garage together on 2 separate nights. They weren't arm in arm or touching, but they arrived minutes apart and walked toward the same parking stall, which was nowhere near either of their assigned spaces. The timestamp didn't lie. This wasn't a spontaneous moment of weakness. It had been building for a while. Rosa looked at Mira with a level of exhaustion that didn't resemble anger. It resembled someone confirming the truth she had feared. She said she had noticed Quinn spending more time away from home recently. She said he returned late without explanations and acted distant. She said there had been a similar situation last year when Quinn met another woman in a garage near his office. She believed he had stopped. She believed they worked through it. Then she turned toward me and said she needed the truth because something about Quinn's story didn't add up at home either. She pulled out her phone and showed a message Quinn had sent her at the same time Mira told me she was stuck in traffic. Quinn had told his wife he was working late with his team. Their lies synced too perfectly. Before any of us could respond, Mira suddenly turned and tried to leave the garage. She walked fast toward the elevator, but Rosa stepped into her path. The two of them exchanged tense words, not shouted but sharp enough to raise the pressure in the air. I moved closer only to prevent the situation from escalating further. Mira tried to claim again that everything was being misunderstood. Rosa told her the footage said otherwise. Mira tried to walk around her, but Rosa held her ground. The tension cracked when Mira attempted to shove past her, and I had to step between them. The confrontation wasn't violent, but it was loud enough to attract attention from residents arriving for work. A few people gathered near the ramp, whispering. The building manager hurried down the stairs after someone alerted him. He ordered everyone to step back and said the footage would determine the next steps. In the middle of the chaos, Quinn arrived. His face drained of color when he saw us gathered. He didn't approach. He didn't say a word. He turned around fast and walked toward the exit like the building itself had become dangerous for him. That reaction told me everything. He wasn't ready to face any piece of what was unfolding. The garage felt like a pressure chamber ready to crack open completely. None of us knew yet what the next reveal would be, but we all sensed it would be worse than the last. The garage chaos didn't settle after Quinn fled. People wandered back toward their cars, but every pair of eyes lingered on Mira and Rosa like they were trying to figure out which version of the story to believe. The building manager guided us all upstairs to avoid more noise, but the tension followed us into the elevator like an unwelcome passenger. When we stepped out onto our floor, Mira rushed ahead and shut herself inside the apartment. Rosa stood in the hallway, clutching her phone with the stiffness of someone bracing for impact. She told me she needed time to process everything before going home. She didn't trust Quinn's next move and didn't want to confront him angry. I offered her a seat on the bench near the elevator, but she said she preferred to walk outside for fresh air. She thanked me for being honest and headed toward the stairwell. Her steps were steady, but her shoulders slumped as if she were carrying more weight than she had room for. I stayed in the hallway for a moment, trying to decide whether to enter the apartment or give Mira space. That choice got taken away from me when Myra's mother appeared from the elevator holding a large purse and wearing the expression of someone who had been waiting for the perfect moment to make an entrance. She walked toward me like she had every right to be there. She didn't ask if she could come in. She didn't even greet me. She pushed past me and started knocking on our door like she owned the property. Mira opened it, startled at first, then relieved. Her mother stepped inside and began pacing the living room without waiting for an invitation. She spoke rapidly, demanding to know if the camera footage was still stored, demanding to know who had access, demanding to know what the building staff had said. She talked as if everything depended on control, not truth. Mira stood near her like a child waiting for instructions. I stayed near the entrance and watched her mother move around the room, picking up objects that didn't belong to her, rearranging things like she wanted to scrub the place clean of the previous night. She turned to me suddenly and insisted that the entire situation could still be managed if I cooperated. She claimed the footage didn't need to exist. She claimed relationships could be repaired if embarrassing details stayed buried. She treated me as if I were the problem rather than the person who had been blindsided in his own building. I asked her why she had tried to access the cameras at dawn. She didn't deny it. She said she needed to protect her daughter from irreversible consequences. She said reputation mattered more than impulse. She said people survived mistakes only when others stayed quiet. While she spoke, Mira watched me with a nervous tightness around her mouth, as if she expected me to give in. Her mother kept moving closer, lowering her voice with a tone that pushed responsibility onto me. She insisted everything could be handled privately if I stopped asking questions. The suggestion disturbed me more than the betrayal itself. It meant they had something concrete to lose, something bigger than embarrassment. Before I could answer, there was another knock at the door. This time it wasn't Rosa. It wasn't Quinn. It wasn't the building manager. It was the police. 2 officers stood outside, polite but serious. They said a report had been filed concerning an altercation in the parking garage the night before. The words landed like a hammer. An altercation. A report. They asked if they could come inside to clarify statements. Myra's face went pale. Her mother's expression hardened into something cold. I stepped aside to let them in because refusing would make everything worse. The officers didn't look aggressive. They looked like they had done this kind of routine countless times. They calmly explained that someone claimed I had threatened physical harm during an argument in the garage. They didn't mention names, but we all knew who had made the accusation. Quinn. The lie he told Rosa was the same lie he had told the police. Myra's mother immediately began talking. She said there had been a misunderstanding. She said emotions were high and people said things they didn't mean. She tried to shape the narrative before the officers could even ask questions. One of the officers held up a hand and asked her to step back. He wanted to hear from me first. I explained the sequence of events clearly, without exaggeration, without emotion twisting the message. I told them what I heard, what I saw, and what Quinn and Mira had said. I told them about the car alarm, the crowd, the security guard, and how I walked away from the confrontation while Quinn stayed behind. The officers listened carefully, jotting notes and asking for details about the angle where I first saw them. When they finished, they shifted their attention to Mira. Her answers were hesitant. She stumbled over timelines, hesitated each time the conversation returned to the garage entrance, avoided mentioning Quinn directly, and contradicted herself twice. The officers picked up on it, exchanging glances that suggested they recognized an unreliable witness. While this unfolded, the hallway grew noisy. Someone else had walked up to the apartment. A familiar voice called out that he needed to speak to the officers. The door remained open, and Owen stepped into view holding his phone as if it were evidence. He explained he wanted to correct something before misinformation spiraled out of control. Owen wasn't the type to get involved unless he believed it mattered. He said that weeks ago, he noticed disturbances in the garage during late hours. He said he suspected residents might be using the space for private meetups. He didn't report it because it didn't affect safety, but he recorded some footage on his personal phone as part of his nightly rounds. He had a habit of documenting odd situations, not because he enjoyed snooping, but because he had been blamed once in a previous job for not reporting suspicious behavior. He looked at me with an uncomfortable apology before showing the officers his screen. The video was grainy, but the figures were unmistakable. Mira and Quinn entering the same corner of the garage during late hours. They walked separately, but their paths converged behind the same parked car. It wasn't definitive proof of infidelity, but it contradicted everything they had claimed. The officers watched closely. Myra's mother tried to interrupt, insisting that the footage was taken out of context. One officer asked her firmly to stop speaking unless addressed. Owen offered to send the full video file to the department. The officers accepted. Then came the twist none of us expected. Rosa appeared again, breathing hard, carrying a folder tucked under her arm. She told the officers she had discovered something after leaving earlier and wanted it documented. She held out her phone and showed a message Quinn had sent another woman 2 months ago, a woman whose name neither of us recognized. The message confirmed a meeting location. The location matched the same parking spot in our garage. Quinn wasn't just meeting Mira there. He was rotating people like it was a private schedule. The officers processed all of this quietly. They said they would write an official supplemental report and needed each person's contact information. They said the initial accusation against me appeared questionable in light of the new footage and statements. They asked if anyone else had video evidence. Myra's mother froze completely. When they finished taking statements, they stepped outside to contact their supervisor. Rosa leaned against the wall and held her forehead. She wasn't crying. She wasn't yelling. She looked like someone whose reality had just been rewritten twice in 1 hour. Mira sank onto the couch with her hands on her knees. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at her mother. She stared at the floor as if the pattern in the carpet might deliver an escape. Her mother kept whispering to her about strategies and damage control. She didn't care about the truth. She cared about containment. While their whispering filled the room, I stepped out into the hallway, needing distance. Owen stood nearby, wiping sweat from his forehead. He muttered that he had held onto that footage because something about those nights felt wrong. He apologized again, but I told him he had done the right thing. Behind us, the officers finished their call and returned with new instructions. They said all parties involved would be contacted again soon. They reminded us not to interfere with evidence or attempt to alter footage. Myra's mother stiffened at the word alter, and the officers noticed. When they left, the hallway fell silent again. But the silence didn't feel empty. It felt loaded. Something had broken open, and the fallout was inevitable. The only question left was how deep the damage would reach once the truth hit every corner it touched. The officers left the building, and for a moment everything in the hallway felt suspended, like the air itself was waiting for the next disaster to unfold. Myra's mother stepped back into the apartment with a sharp expression, whispering instructions to her daughter in a tone that made it obvious she believed she could still salvage the situation. She didn't acknowledge the truth unraveling around her, only the parts she thought she could bend. Mira remained silent. She wasn't defending herself anymore. She wasn't demanding to be heard. She sat on the couch with both hands gripping the edge of a cushion like she needed something solid to hold on to. Her mother tried to nudge her, telling her that they needed to create a unified statement before the police returned. Mira didn't respond, which only made her mother push harder. I told them both I needed space. Myra's mother attempted to follow me, but I shut the bedroom door before she could step in. Even then, I heard her pacing, opening cabinets, muttering arguments, her voice rising each time she demanded Mira explain something that kept shifting in her story. I didn't care what they sorted through. The facts were clear enough. Eventually, the apartment became so loud with their bickering that I stepped back into the hallway. I didn't want to be near either of them. I didn't want to hear desperation packaged as logic. I needed to breathe. I walked down the hallway and leaned against the window overlooking the courtyard. That was when I saw Rosa standing outside the building near the benches, arms folded tightly, staring at nothing. She must have stayed nearby, processing everything alone. I headed downstairs to check on her. She didn't notice me until I sat beside her on the bench. She apologized for showing the officers the messages she found. She said she hadn't expected the investigation to expand. She said she didn't know whether to be angry at Quinn or ashamed that she believed him earlier. I told her none of this was her fault. She tried to hold herself steady, but the week had clearly drained her. She talked about Quinn's pattern of disappearing, his excuses, the weeks where he acted affectionate only to turn distant the next day. She said she often felt like there was a script he followed, and she was supposed to pretend it made sense. While we talked, the building manager approached us cautiously. He asked if we had time to review something inside. His tone was serious enough that we followed him back into the lobby without questioning. He guided us to the security office, where Owen was reviewing additional angles of the previous night. What we saw made Rosa sit down hard on the nearest chair. The footage showed Quinn entering the garage after the confrontation, just like Owen had described. But the camera also captured something else. It caught Quinn returning to his own car before approaching the security panel. He wasn't alone during that moment. He was on a call, pacing back and forth in a frustrated pattern. The audio wasn't recorded, but the footage made it obvious that he was panicking. He kept rubbing his face, pointing toward Myra's car as if arguing about the scene. He then approached the security panel again and tapped it repeatedly with shaking hands. The timestamps didn't lie. He had spent nearly 10 minutes trying to access footage he had no authorization for. Rosa's face shifted slowly from exhaustion to realization. She said this wasn't the first time Quinn attempted to manipulate evidence during an argument with her. She described another situation from years earlier where Quinn deleted messages before she could see them. She said he had a habit of covering tracks rather than accepting consequences. Owen paused the footage and looked at me. He said the police would likely return for statements. He said they already called him again while he was reviewing the footage. He said the department wanted the building to preserve every angle for investigation. I nodded. I felt more tired than angry. Reality had turned into a maze with no good exits, only branching corridors of consequences. I returned upstairs after a while and found Mira alone in the living room. Her mother was gone. Mira sat on the floor with her back against the coffee table, staring at the blank TV screen. Her eyes were swollen, but she wasn't crying. She didn't ask where I went. She didn't ask what Owen showed us. She just asked if I planned to move out. I told her the truth. I couldn't stay with her after what happened. She nodded like she expected that answer. She admitted that her mother pushed her into lying. She admitted she didn't know how to face what she had done. She admitted she wasn't just meeting Quinn for the first time that night. She didn't explain further. She didn't need to. The silence between us filled in every missing detail. Before she could say anything else, someone banged on the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Mira flinched. I opened it cautiously, expecting Quinn or her mother, but neither stood there. It was two officers, the same pair from earlier. They asked for Mira. She approached hesitantly, wiping her hands on her shirt. The officers told her they needed to accompany them to the station for additional questioning. Her mother had contacted them again, trying to alter her daughter's previous statements. The officers wanted to clear the inconsistencies. Mira looked helpless, but she didn't resist. She walked out with them while avoiding my eyes. I stood in the doorway and watched her disappear down the hall. It wasn't satisfying. It wasn't painful. It felt like watching the natural end of a long, spiraling storm. The apartment felt too large after she left, so I walked downstairs again. Rosa had returned to the lobby and was speaking quietly with the building manager. When she saw me, she stood and said she received a call as well. The department scheduled a follow-up meeting for her, too. She looked calmer than earlier, but not stable. She said she planned to stay with her sister until everything settled. Hours passed before the next shock arrived. A uniformed courier entered the lobby with an envelope. He asked for me by name. I took it and opened it immediately. Inside were documents from the building board. They were suspending Quinn's workplace access because the company inside our building received notice of the police investigation. He was barred from entering company floors until further notice. Rosa read the papers with a long exhale, finally seeing consequences reach the right person. Throughout the evening, updates kept circulating between residents. People had seen the commotion earlier, and rumors spread quickly. By the next morning, Quinn faced disciplinary review at his firm. Myra's internship program contacted her for clarification about her involvement in a police incident tied to workplace misconduct. She hadn't even had a chance to return from questioning before consequences started hitting. 2 days later, after I took time off work to regroup, the building manager called me with another update. Myra's mother had been banned from entering the property due to interference with security systems and staff. Owen had filed an incident report describing her attempt to pressure employees into giving her access to the cameras. Rosa called shortly after. She had filed for separation and requested a temporary order preventing Quinn from entering her residence. She said she couldn't risk him retaliating or trying to manipulate evidence again. She sounded tired, but firmer. She said she wanted to rebuild her stability without him. I spent that week packing my things. The apartment felt too heavy with the memory of everything that happened. I broke the lease early using the police report as justification. The staff approved it without hesitation. On my final day there, I passed Mira in the lobby. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in presence. She attempted to speak, but no words formed.